Saugata, ready. So I should speak here.
Yeah.
Oh. I have a feeling that the old method will be better. Let us see. What is the advantage of this new method?
We don't have to set up on the desk.
Oh,
It's exactly the same.
Hello, Swamiji.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there, Saugata, you can switch on. Switch on. I should speak to this.
No.
To this. I should speak to this. I need not speak here, I should speak to this.
Yeah.
The mic only, eh?
Yeah.
Direct, okay. No, they begin, they will introduce first.
Hello, Swamiji.
Yeah. Can you see
I'm
me?
not sure if you are able to hear you, Swamiji.
Saugata, they are not.
We can hear you.
They are
We
not.
can hear you now, Maharaj.
Yeah, can you see me?
We can see and hear you.
You can, okay, but Prajwal, the moderator.
Hello, sorry. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Thank you, Prajwal. I hope all of you can hear.
Maharaj, Swami Vedananda's feed is still audible. That might be the control booth. That needs to mute as well.
Swami Vedanta is not here right now, but can you hear me?
We can see and hear you on both Zoom and on YouTube. But there's a replay.
Sorry.
They have changed the structure a little. That's why. No, it's okay. Yeah, but they can see me. You can see me?
Yes.
Yes, Swamiji.
So everything is okay? I can
Yes.
continue the class? I can start the class?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. Thank you. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. Thank you, Prajwal, for the introduction. And of course, today we have changed the setup a little. That's why a little difficulty at the beginning. So, before continuing this discussion, I want to say a few things. Just to remind you a few important details about the Rigveda, the Samhita that we are discussing. Actually, this Purusha Suktam, the one which I am teaching, the version which I am teaching, is from Rigveda Samhita. It is a, in fact, that same mantra appears in a different form in other Vedas, like Yajurveda, Krishna Yajurveda, Taittiriya Aranyaka. It is much longer, almost 24 verses, and in Atharva Veda, somewhat smaller, and in a very scattered, fragmented form in Samaveda. So the one we are following is from the version from Rigveda Samhita. So of course, there are a few places where the mantras found in Yajurveda version, Taittiriya Aranyaka version, should be accommodated to make the meaning and discussion more complete. So, as I mentioned earlier, we will be sometimes combining some of the mantras from Rigveda and some of the mantras which are found only in Krishna Yajurveda, Taittiriya Aranyaka. So, this is just for detail. Now, Rigveda Samhita, which is our main focus right now, a few details about Rigveda Samhita. I already discussed this earlier, but to remind you, it is the oldest document of Hindu Vedantic tradition, and by and large, all scholars and Indologists agree that it is the oldest available document of spiritual and philosophical inquiry in the history of human civilization. It is divided into 10 sections called mandalas. That is one way of dividing, and another way of dividing is based on Ashtaka, which is roughly more or less Ashtaka, Varga, and so on, which is more or less it is a matter of convenience, especially for those who memorize this entire text right from the early days, in their life. So it has got 10 sections, 10 mandalas, and more than 10,000 rig. So rig is the basic unit of Rigveda Samhita. Rig means a hymn. A hymn in the form of in poetical form, it is called a hymn. Some verses in praise of some divine reality. So, in fact, it is derived from the Sanskrit root called dhatu, called rij, which itself means stotram or hymn. And it has got 64 chapters and more than 1,000 suktas. So suktas is a long hymn which has got many rigs, many verses. There are many verses in each of these hymn. So the Sanskrit word is suktam, the English equivalent is hymn, hymn. And Sayana's commentary is very important. That's what we are following right now. To give a brief history, especially the history of different commentaries written on Rigveda Samhita. The earliest available commentary is the one by Swami, who lived in the 7th century AD, maybe around 120 years or so before Shankaracharya, Swami. But he gave a very rather incomplete interpretation, in the sense he treated the whole text just as a manual for explaining various rituals and the mantras, some in the Samhita portion which he commented. All these verses are meant for praising different deities, gods and goddesses. And he interpreted the whole text in what you call Yajñikartham, which means in the ritualistic interpretation. That's what you hear, ritualistic interpretation in terms of rituals. That's one thing. Now, of course, after Sayana, there were other commentators. You find Bhattabhaskara, who wrote commentaries, of course, in Yajurveda. But the Purusha Suktam itself has got more than Sayana's commentary. So you find, for example, not only Sayana, who interpreted, who explained the Vedic symbolism before Purusha Suktam. Apart from Sayana, there were also other scholars who wrote commentaries. That is Mangalacharya, Nimbarka, Mahidhara, and these are some of the great scholars who wrote commentaries on Purusha Suktam, not necessarily the entire Vedic literature. So, Purusha Suktam is so important, and it is used in many rituals, in temple installation ceremonies, and frequently it is used for Abhisheka, mostly in temples dedicated to different aspects of Vishnu, Narayana. So that's an important thing to remember. Now, it may be of interest to some of you to know that the first rig itself is a hymn in praise of God Agni. Means fire, the fire, that means Agni, which is symbolized by fire. So, Agnimele Purohidam Yajnasya Devamurticham Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. This is the beginning of the Rigveda Samhita, the first mantra of the first mandala. There are altogether 10 mandalas. And it concludes, in the 10th mandala, it concludes Yatha Susahasati. It's actually a hymn for unity, coordination, harmony in all humanity. So, these are some of the details. Now, one important thing that may be of interest to you is Sayana makes some very important observations at the very beginning, at the introduction of the Rigveda Samhita. It may be of interest to many of the serious students. But before that, Sayana himself gives a structure, a rough idea of the structure of the text that he found, that he used for writing this commentary. Please remember, Sayanacharya lived in the 14th century. I think he must have passed away in 1300s. In the 1300s, he was a remarkable person. He was a genius, and because he wrote commentaries on our entire Vedic literature, there are scholars who argue that he may have taken the help of many other scholars to get this huge corpus of Vedic commentary literature to be formed. Because he was a minister, he was a military general, and he was a great administrator attached to the great Vijayanagar Empire, which is actually responsible for the preservation of the traditional Hindu canon in the south, when many parts of India were subjected to invasion by Muslim forces, mostly Afghans and Arabs and others, when they started invading the northwestern regions of India. Many of the scholars retreated, they moved southward, and it was a Vijayanagar Empire which preserved the Vedic tradition. So he makes some observations in his own introduction. It's called the Bhumika, I mean foreword or Bhumika, in his own commentary on the Rigveda Samhita. Rigvedaha asmabhihi shadanganusarena vyakhyayade samhita grantho vyakhyadavyaha sacha agnimile ityarabhya. Agnimile purohidam, that's the first rig. So agnimile ityarabhya, beginning with agnimile, that's what he writes. Ityarabhya yadhava susahasadi ityantaha, that's the last rig. So you can imagine, it's a very, very wonderful example of the ancient interpretative literature that Sayanacharya wrote. Yathava susahasadi ityantaha ashtakandehi Desamandalehi, Chatushtadhyayehi, Panjasityanuvakyaihi, Ishud Adhika Sahasra Suktaihi, Ishud Adhika Disahasra Vargaihi. That means 2000 Vargas. Means another way of classifying the entire text. And again, Ishud Adhika, Ishad Adhikadipi, Desha Sahasra Sankhyabi, Rigbhischa Upetaha. So, more than 10,000 rigs. So remember, rig is the particular unit. Rig means a hymn. Here means a verse. So there are, hymn itself is a translation, English translation of a much bigger unit called suktam. So in many suktas, there are several verses. So rig is a verse. In Sanskrit called a sloka or a verse. So that's what he writes, Rigbhischa Upetaha. This is his own analysis of the structure of the Rigveda that came into his hands, which he commented upon. Now, coming to another important subject. It is said that, you have to study the Vedas with the proper understanding of the meaning. So, sometimes you find in the Vedic interpretative literature, not necessarily by Sayana, but other Vedic scholars, during the pre-Sayana times. See, for example, Vedaha vai brahmanam ajagama gopayama sevadishtehamasmi. This in the Samhita Upanishad Brahmana you find. And again, sthanurayam bharahara kilabhut aditya vedam na vijanadi yaha artham. It's very important for us to understand. What it says is, if a person just recites the Vedic mantras without understanding the meaning, that is sthanurayam bharaharaha. Sthanu means a big pillar or a wall which bears a huge weight. So it serves a purpose, it just it bears the weight of the roof. So if a person, if anybody just learns only how to recite the Vedas without understanding the mantra, it may not help you to obtain the full purpose or benefit of Vedic study. Because the unit of Veda is called a rig. It is also called a mantra. Mantra is a verbal symbol, a statement or a verse. And it is defined as manana trayadeti mantraha. So, how do you call it a mantra? A sacred word symbol. You study how to chant, how to recite, and then you meditate upon the meaning. So you should understand the meaning of the mantra. Then you should meditate upon. If you don't do that, it's just like a wall or a pillar that just bears the weight of the roof of a building. So, sthanurayam bharaharaha kilabhut aditya vedam no vijanadi yaha artham. Yaha artham na vijanadi. A person who doesn't even strive to understand the meaning of Vedic mantras, but just memorizes the entire Vedic literature. They are compared to walls or pillars which just serve the purpose of bearing the weight of the roof of the building. So that's an interesting. Now remember, it doesn't mean that reciting the Vedic mantras without understanding the meaning is useless. Not at all. Absolutely no. We should not get away with that impression. It would be wrong to say that everyone should and always try to understand the meaning of every Vedic mantra that is reciting. Not always possible, because it's a matter of dedicating one's entire life for it. But what it says is, one should also try to understand the meaning and reflect on the meaning of the mantras. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a school of scholars, and there have been many scholars in the past who used to argue that just reciting or listening to Vedic mantras itself is beneficial. Actually, it is beneficial, no doubt about it. When you recite or when you listen to a sacred hymn, some sacred mantras, which you don't understand the meaning of, still it has certainly some benefit, because the sound vibrations can influence the atmospheric conditions of a room or a hall or any place. If you go on reciting, reading, repeating or listening to some holy or philosophical literature or recitation of some holy word symbols, mantras, then that place actually gets purified. That place creates an environment which has an uplifting effect on anyone who goes there with a sense of shraddha or concentration. But at the same time, it is also important for everyone to understand the meaning and reflect on the meaning, contemplate on the meaning. Then the full import and the spiritual potency of Vedic mantras begin to manifest. So that's why manana trayate iti mantraka. Literally it means mantra is a word symbol which will protect a person if he reads it, listens to it, understands the meaning, and then reflects or contemplates or meditates upon that particular meaning of the mantra. So manana actually means deep inward contemplation and reflection or meditation, so to speak, on the meaning of a word symbol. This is about Vedas in general. Now, a few important observations about Sayana's commentary. It's very important because this is a serious discussion. So we are mostly taking the interpretation of Sayanacharya in giving out the meaning of Purusha Suktam. Sayanacharya, of course, he gave a lot of importance to the ritualistic aspect of Purusha Suktam, but he also gave a lot of importance to the Adhyatmika, the spiritual import, the spiritual significance of this important Suktam, which is used for meditation by many spiritual scholars. And if you just imagine the amount of work that Sayana did, he wrote commentaries not only for Rigveda Samhita, Krishna Yajurveda, Taittiriya Samhita, I already mentioned, Shukla Yajurveda, Kandu Samhita, Samaveda Samhita, Atharvaveda Samhita, and Taittiriya Brahmana, Taittiriya Aranyaka, Tandya Brahmana is part of Samaveda. Shadvinshat Brahmanam, Samavidhana Brahmanam, Ashaya Brahmanam, Devadadhyaya Brahmanam, Upanishad Brahmanam, Samhita Upanishad Brahmanam, Vamsha Brahmanam. All these are important contributions of Sayana. So that's why many scholars, including some of the earlier traditional teachers, gave the view that Sayanacharya, because he was a very powerful, prominent person, must have used the contributions of many Pandits and scholars of those times who compiled the commentary. Of course, he must have played the most prominent role in the entire endeavor. But it's logical, reasonable to believe that this interpretative literature is the effort of a group of scholars. And of course, even there are other important books which are not so very profound. Subhashita Sudhanidhi, Prayashchitta Sudhanidhi, Alankara Sudhanidhi, Purushartha Sudhanidhi, Madhavya Dhaduvurti, all these. So, and according to many scholars, he first wrote the commentary to Yajurveda. That is, because Yajurveda is very important from the ritualistic standpoint. So his first work was perhaps a commentary on the Taittiriya Samhita, which is part of Krishna Yajurveda. I already mentioned this earlier. Yajurveda has got two versions. One is Krishna Yajurveda, the other is Shukla Yajurveda, belonging to Yajnavalkya tradition. Those who have got any doubt, they can ask any more for clarification during the interaction. And his last book was, of course, his commentary on Atharva Veda. And then, in fact, he writes in his introduction to Atharva Veda Samhita, he says, Vyakhyaya Veda Tridaya Mamushmika Phalam Aikika Amushmika Phalam Chadurtham Vyachikirshati. So Shayanacharya says, Vyakhyaya Veda Tridaya Mamushmika Phalam Aikika Amushmika Phalam Chadurtham Vyachikirshati. So he says that whatever he has written, whatever bhash he has written, and also what is written to Bodhgata, the introduction, it is all meant for the benefit, for the welfare of humanity in general. That's the idea behind. And then, of course, there is another important thing that he mentions. It's also very important to remember. I don't mean to say that everyone in modern time, the 21st century, will be able to follow these rules, but it's better, at least academically, to understand the significance, the profoundness, and the seriousness of Sayanacharya. He makes another very important observation with regard to the study of each sukta. So, for example, he says, Yohava Avidida Ashaya Chando Devatena Brahmanena Mandrena Yejadi Va Adhyapayedi Va Sthanum Va Gartam Va Pradivadhyate Pravami Yate Papiyan Bhavadi Tasmat Etani Vidyad. So what he says, if a person, if an individual just recites this, reads this, let's say as a piece of novel, short story or something, as an entertainment, without remembering the great sage to whom the great truths enshrined in this particular sukta were revealed. For example, Vishwamitra, there are many Narayana, and there are many sages. Narayana is the Rishi of Purusha Sukta. So Narayana Rishi, if you should mention the beginning itself, paying out tribute to the great sage to whom this great sutta, rather the spiritual experience behind this sutra was mystically revealed during his meditation. That's the real meaning. Narayana Rishi means what? Narayana, the Rishi of this Purusha Sukta. What it means is, when the great sage Narayana sat in meditation, practicing spiritual disciplines for long years, as a result of his contemplation, the great truths enshrined in this Purusha Suktam were revealed or self-revealed to him in a mystical sense. So you should always pay tributes to the great sage to whom it is revealed. Again, and also chandas. So some of these mantras are put in anushtup or trishtup. There are 7 important chandas. Of course, there are different ways. There are many. But we will discuss these 7 chandas meters, which are called paridhis when we discuss the saptasyasan parithayeha trisapta samidhakritaha. When we discuss the next mantra that is coming after some time, we will discuss chandas. So, Sayanacharya, the great interpreter, commentator, says that one should remember the particular chandas or meter in which this particular hymn is composed. And Devata, the deity to whom it is addressed, whom the sages sought or tried to praise and pray to in this particular hymn. And he says he actually condemns them in rather strong language. That's what he says, I mean, they will have a lot of problems. They may fall when they walk. They may hit a stone and they may fall. That's, of course, a symbolic way of revealing the importance and the significance of remembering the great sages to whom this mantra was revealed, and also the meter in which it is composed. You have to remember, we should not judge these statements from today's perspective. It is a way of emphasizing the fact that one should always pay tribute to the great authors, the great sages, to whom these Vedic truths were revealed. So this is all about our present discussion. Now we will begin our discussion, formal discussion of the mantra of Rigveda Samhita, that is Rigvedic version of Purusha Suktam. Of course, we will be incorporating the Taittiriya Aranyaka version also in course of time. Now, those of you those of you who listen, who take this Mantra Pushpam version of Purusha Suktam, you should remember it is from Taittiriya Aranyaka, Yajurvediya recension, Yajurveda version. So the mantra order may be different. There is one mantra which is found only in Yajurveda. It is not found in Rigveda. But that mantra is very important. So that's why we are discussing. The particular mantra, it is given as the seventh mantra in the Yajurveda tradition, that is Taittiriya Aranyaka. It is not found in the Rigveda version, because Rigveda version has got only 16 mantras, 16 verses. Taittiriya Aranyaka version has got, that Yajurveda version has got 24. So it is Saptasyasan Parithayaha Trisapta Samidha Kritaha Devaha Tad Yajnam Tanvanaha Abadhrin Purusham Pashum. This is the mantra. What it says is, simple meaning can be this: for protecting yaga of this yajna, certain protecting elements are necessary. You have to put things around it, parithi, means limits. So the 7 meters called chandas were conceived to be the protecting limits of this ritual. So what is a ritual? It's called Prajapati Yajnam or Prajapati Yagam or Prajapati Yajnam. What it means is, in the coming verses, today onwards, we will be discussing the whole concept of creation. I mentioned earlier the Vedic, there are many Vedic equivalents to Genesis. But this is perhaps the grandest and the most beautiful, most profound attempt to explain creation, not as a monotheistic God creating this world out of void, but rather how the creation came into existence as a ritualistic process, as a yajna, which involves the act of renunciation and the act of meditation. The act of renunciation, the act of meditation, both are found. So it is called a Prajapati Yagam. So we already mentioned this, in the early days, in the earlier classes we already mentioned Tasmat Viradajayada Virajo Adhipurushaka Sujado Atirichyada. From that Purusha, the entire cosmos came into existence, and then that Virat Purusha came into existence. This cosmic person came into existence, not Purusha, but cosmic person came into existence. And then this cosmic Purusha started manifesting in the entire creation as in 2 dimensions: the transcendental Tribad, which equal to 3/4 of this supreme reality, and 1/4 is Pada, and the empirical world that we already discussed earlier. Now here is a symbolic discussion here. So the paridhi means limits in this Prajapati Yagam. So you have to remember the whole creation or emergence of world, including the cosmos, the stars, the sun and moon, and also the forests, aranya, gramyaschaya, you find animals which grow in the forest, and different human beings and other animals that grow in villages. And Tasmad Ashwa Jayanta, then horses came into existence. So you find a symbolic statement of the emergence of different creatures in this empirical world. All this happened as an act of yajna. So remember, we should always remember the meaning of yajna. The superficial translation can mean sacrifice. It can lead to a lot of misunderstanding. Sacrifice can mean many things. Animal sacrifice and so on. It's totally different. But sacrifice means renunciation of one's own selfish desire and doing something great and noble for everyone. Yajñavai seshthatamam karma. Yajna is nothing but a noble act of compassion and unselfishness. This is the Katyayana Vedic interpreter and Vedic hermeneutist, his definition of yajna. I mentioned already earlier, yajñāthar karmanahanyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tadartham karma gondeya mukta sangas samachara. Also Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if you don't live in this world and work in this world and do your duty in this world as yajna, you will be bound. If any action, yajñāthar karmanaha anyatra, so yajñārthar anyatra karma. I mean any karma, any act, any activity other than as yajna, that means any activity without renouncing one's own selfish desires, any activity done with selfish desires, lokoyam karma bandhanaha, it will bind you. Therefore, live in this world, do everything, and all your actions should be like yajna. Now, how this creation took place? Creation is an act of yajna on the part of God, on the part of Creator. So that's an interesting thing. So, in this yajna, now yajna in its physical form is a Vedic ritual. It needs many things. It needs samit. Samit means that fagots, dry twigs of firewood for burning the fire, into which the ritualists or the priest offer many things. It is Indraya idam namama. This is for Indra, it is not for me. So all that I offer as an act of yajna, it is not for me, it is for you. So act of renunciation, act of desirelessness. These are two important components of yajna. That's why yajñavai seshthatamam karma. The noblest act is yajna. That's a literal translation. How does an act become noblest? The most wonderful act when it is combined with renunciation and also with total freedom from desires. So now think of this ritual. If you are those of you who have not seen the ritual, at least some of you must have seen our small ritual that we perform every Sunday. This is a 1 hour homa, a fire ritual. That is a very minute and very, actually many of the Vedic rituals last for 21 days, 14 days and so on. That's a there are rituals that last many more days. But in any ritual there should be a paridhi. What are the paridhi means? They put some fagots or something around the altar, and symbolically the 7 meters, the 7 Vedic meters are conceived to be the protecting elements. I mean, the elements that protects yaga or yajna. Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Brihadi, Pankti, Trishtup, Chekati. 7 chanda means meters. So we will discuss chanda later. Chanda is one of the Vedangas. I already discussed at the beginning of the early classes, Vedangas, Shiksha, Kalpam, Vyakaranam, Niruktam, Chandra, Jyotisham. Already discussed. But anyway, here, 7 Vedic meters are conceived to be Parithi, the protecting factors. Of course, there are, now I mentioned this earlier, I'm explaining this Purusha Sukta, not only based on Sayana's commentary, because Sayana's commentary is somewhat brief and very, very brief, especially with dealing with Purusha Sukta. It's not very elaborate. But other scholars like Pingalacharya, Nimbarka, who was a great devotee belonging to the Vedantic tradition, he was in Vedantic tradition. There were many non-Advaitic schools. Madhva's Advaita Siddhanta, Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita Siddhanta, and there was, of course, other different schools. Chaitanya, Baladeva wrote a commentary in Chaitanya, according to Chaitanya school. Then Vallabhacharya, Nimbarkacharya, and Abhinavagupta and others who wrote commentaries on Brahma Sutras. So, Nimbarkacharya written a commentary, Pingalacharya has written commentaries, Mahidhara has written commentaries. So I am explaining this in the light of various commentaries. So another interpretation of Parithi, those factors which protect yaga ritual, called three altars. The Ahavaniyagni, when you perform any ritual, Vedic ritual, you start a fire, and into that fire you offer many things, maybe dirty, that is yogurt or milk or cooked food, cooked rice, different grains cooked, and also ghee, clarified butter. All these are offered. So again, it has got 3 altars. And then 3 altars on northern side and sun. These are some of the explanations given by some commentators. Another interpretation of this Parithi, 7 protecting elements of Vedic ritual, conceived in the Prajapati Yajnam, is Mahatotvam, that is the first evolute from Prakriti. Prakriti and Purusha, there are 2 fundamental absolute categories in Sankhya system of philosophy. Purusha is self-effulgent, Prakriti is non-effulgent, but Prakriti is the source of the entire evolution of cosmos. This is Sankhya view. Remember, don't mix this with Vedanta or Vedas. But all these are to be understood to interpret properly this Purusha Suktam. So Mahatotvam is the first evolute from Prakriti, and Ahankaram. And then 5 Tanmatras. Tanmatras are the subtle elements, subtle dimensions of the 5 elements that constitute this world. They are the subtle dimension of the 5 gross elements that constitute empirical world. So these are things. And then, so you can imagine, Saptasya san paridhaya Trisapta samidha kritaha. Trisapta means 7 into 3, 21. So, just imagine, Samidha kritaha. What is Samidha? Samidha is nothing but fagots or twigs. So, in ancient times, the children, when they go to Vedic hermitages, used to bring with them some little firewood, dry woods. It be used in the Vedic rituals, which involve blazing fire and offering the fire, there are certain rules and regulations, cooked food or rice or milk or ghee, all these things are offered. So, but the primary element is the samit. Samit means dry fagots. So remember, here the commentators say 12 months, 5 seasons, 12 months constituting the whole year, 5 seasons, spring, Grishma, spring, summer, autumn, monsoon and winter. So frequently, pre-winter, that is called Hemanta, and winter proper, Shishira. These are taken together. So, of course, in Sanskrit language, you find, Grishma, Vasanta, it is spring, Grishma is summer, Sharat is autumn, Varsha is monsoon, and Shishira is winter. So, Trisapta Samhita Kritaha. So, these 5 seasons plus 12 months, and of course 3 worlds, that is the celestial world, the earth and the nether world, mind, all these constitute 21 summits. So you can imagine, you have to think of the entire process of creation or emergence of the cosmos as an act of ritual where the sages have started a sacrificial fire into which they are offering. And around the sacrificial fire, 7 meters, that is Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Brihadi, Pankti, Trishtup, Jagati. Or Ahavani Agni, it's 3 altars, and 3 altars north and sun, another important component. Or another interpretation is, Mahatattu Mahangaram, the first 2 evolutes from Prakriti, plus 5 Tanmatras, which are actually the original source of the 5 elements and the whole entire world. These are conceived symbolically to be the protecting factors. And then twigs that you offer in it, or when you start the blazing fire in a homa, in a yaga or yajna, you need twigs, fagots of wood, firewood. So it's the 5 seasons, 12 months, and 3 levels of existence: heaven, earth, and the nether world, so to speak. Okay, now plus mind. So you can see 21. So it is a very interesting Vedic symbolism that you find here. Of course, there is another interpretation: Karmendriyas, Jnanendriyas, Pancha Mahabhutas, Pancha Pranas, and mind. Mind is always very important, because in the coming verses you are going to find the importance of mind. Why? Those of you who have got the book, if you look at the next one, of course, just Tam Yajnam Barhishi Praukshan. Tam Yajnam Barhishi Praukshan. So you find the Purusha is conceived to be, he is the firstborn and is conceived to be Yajna Pashu. And that, so you find that in the Vedics of ancient time, there must have been the involvement of animal sacrifice in some of the Vedic rituals in ancient times. So that symbolism is taken. Here, not animal. Human mind is made pure. So in the sacrificial ritual, some goat or some other animal will be got and tied, and then the priest will sprinkle water. Barhishi means that the darbha, it is called, kind of some dry grass which is used for some ritualistic purposes. With that, they will put some water, and water they sprinkle on this. So, but here, what do? Our own mind is offered to the Lord. So the entire yajna takes another dimension. Not a physical yajna not the ritual that is, or yaga or something that you see happening around, some priest sitting and starting a fire, nothing. That symbolism is taken, and that symbolism is used to explain the emergence of creation or existence. So what happened? This this human mind was offered to the Lord. And then, with mantras, with contemplation, with meditation, that mind was purified. Barhishi Prakshan. Prakshana means actually taking little sprinkled water and sprinkling for purification. It's a purification ceremony. Now remember, so these are just examples that we are going to find. So like that, here in this particular mantra in the Taittiriya Aranyaka, tam devadya yajnam tanvanaha. So those devas performed this yajna and they tied this yajna pashu, the sacrificial animal, to a post. But here what it means, you dedicate your mind to holy thoughts. And then Barhishi Prakshan, the next mantra comes, That means you take a piece of, some pieces of dry grass, which is called Darbha Barhishi, and you dip in water, chant some mantra, and you do prakshana, means purification, the flower or whatever it is, naivedya. You can see in puja, sometimes, the darbha is taken, it's a dry grass, put together, sprinkle in water, utter mantra, and purification ceremony. The water is sprinkled on what is going to be offered to the Lord. This happens in all temples every day. But here, that act is considered to be the spiritual act on the part of God. So what happened? So, mind is offered to the Lord, then mind is purified, not with water, but with prayer and meditation and contemplation. And then the mind realizes within itself that it is non-distinct and non-different. The microcosm realizes within itself the fact that it is non-different, non-distinct from macrocosm. This is the symbolism here. Okay, now I shall just read Sayana's commentary. Srishti sadhaka yogyaha, that is Sayana's commentary. Tam yajnam barhishi prakshan. Of course, that is found in the Rigveda Samhita itself. Saptasyasan paritheka, that is not found in Rigveda, it is found only in Yajurveda Taittiriya Aranyaka. But the next mantra, which appears as the eighth mantra in Taittiriya, is given as, next mantra is given Taittiriya is eighth mantra, in Rigveda it is seventh mantra. Tam yajnam barhishi prakshan purusham jadamagradhaka tena deva yajanda sadhyaha rishayaschaye. This is the meaning here. Before that, there is another important subject that we have to take up. Now, all these things are happening at the empirical level. Now, in the Rigveda itself, there is another very famous mantra that you may have already heard, some of you at least. It is called Asivamiya Suktam. Asivamiya Suktam is a well-known suktam in the first mandala of Rigveda. Asivamasya palidasya hotuhu tasya bhrata madhyamo astyasnaha. This is how it begins. It is an important and fairly long suktam. It is Dirghadama is Rishi, Jagati, Prastara, Pankti, Anushtup, Trishtup, Chandamsi. So a number of chandas, meters are involved in this long hymn. And Vishwadevada, Vagapa, Shagadhuma, Soma, Keshina, Agni Suryo Vayuscha, Surya, Saraswan, Saraswati, Satyaha, Chadevataha. Okay, now here in the Asivamiya Suktam, this idea is presented in a much more philosophical language. So we discussed here in the earlier Rigveda mantra that the whole creation came into existence as a result of austerity, meditation, and renunciation, which altogether constitute yajna or sacrifice. on the part of the Lord. So, to explain that, the symbolism from a Vedic ritual is taken. So in a Vedic ritual, there are priests, Rishayah, mentioned here, and there is a sacrificial fire, and there is an altar, different altars. There are places for Surya and of different priests. So all these are now given, all these are explained in the light of the entire cosmos. For example, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, 5 elements, and 5 vital airs. That is Panchajnanendriya, Panchakarmendriya, Panchaprana, and Panchamahabhutas, plus mind, this 21, are conceived to be twigs used for starting this fire. And around this altar, there is a protecting mechanism. Sometimes they put different long twigs around. It is compared to 7 meters that you find in the entire Vedic literature. The most important meters in Vedic literature. So the whole Vedic symbolism of Vedic ritual is used to explain the emergence of this universe. That's why the Purusha Suktam interpretation is a bit difficult unless we keep in mind the whole picture of a typical Vedic ritual, Vedic sacrifice, Vedic yajna or yaga, which involves blazing fire, a protecting wall around, not wall, I mean a protecting barrier around, made with twigs. Then a number of twigs necessary to begin to start a fire. Then a lot of things offered in the fire, a lot of mantras, and also the act of purification that priests do by taking tam yajnam barhishi praukshan, by taking darbha, this special kind of dry grass, put together, is taken, a dip in water, you utter mantras, then it is sprinkled everywhere. This is what is done in Vedic yajna. In the Asivamiya Suktam, there are 2 mantras which explained the 2 aspects of creation mentioned in the Purusha Suktam in the previous one. That is Tribad Uday Purushaka Padosya Vishwabhutani. So Padaha Asya Padaha Vishwabhutani. So 1/4, 1/4 of this cosmic reality becomes the empirical world. It emerges, it exists, it disappears, re-emerges, it goes through these cycles of coming to existence, existing, maybe the universe may exist for several billions of years, then getting dissolved in the original cause, and again re-emerging. So, this is what happens, the 1/4 or the 1/4 of that. It is subjected to modification and changes. Tribad Uday Purushaka. But the 3/4, Tribad, the macrocosm, the Tribad represents the eternal, the immortal, the unchanging reality, the transcendental reality, which is not subjected to this process of coming to existence, existing, disappearing, and re-emerging. It always remains the same. In the Asivamiya Suktam, there are 2 mantras which surprisingly are found in Atharva Veda Samhita, Atharva Veda Upanishad. In Munduka Upanishad, these 2 mantras you find. But remember, originally they are taken from Rigveda Samhita, especially in the famous Asivamiya Suktam. So there, if Dva Suparna Savija Sakhaya Samanam Briksham Parishusajade Tayor Anya Pippalam Swadati Anasnan Anyo Abhichakasiti. samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya chojati mukhyamanaha justam yada pashyadi anyamisham asya mahimanam iti vita shoka. This is found only, the second verse is found only in the Atharvaveda, in the Mundaka Upanishad. But the first one which I recited is very important. That is, Dvasuparna Savija Sakhaya Samanam Vriksham Parishasajade Tayor Anya Pippalam Swadati Anasnan Anyu Apichaka Siti. Think of a tree with two birds of identical color. They are friends, they look alike, they move alike, their wings, their color, the feather, everything the same, but at the same time, they behave differently. The one bird is sitting on the branch above, the other one sitting on the branch below. The one sitting on the branch below goes on eating fruits, and sometimes the fruits are sweet, then the bird is happy. Sometimes the fruits are sour, not sweet, it becomes unhappy. It represents the travesty of human life in this world. We suffer and we enjoy. Again we suffer, we enjoy. This is how life goes on. That bird represents the padaka, the quarter, the empirical dimension of existence. The 3/4 or 3/4 is the bird sitting above, on the branch above. But there is a difference. The bird sitting below, which represents padaka or 1/4, represents the ordinary jiva or the empirical created world, which always undergoes changes all the time, happiness and unhappiness, birth, existence, decay, disappearance and re-emergence goes on. But the bird sitting above, it sits quiet, no movement, it is always happy, it is unattached, it is peaceful, it doesn't suffer because it is not seeking enjoyment. So it is not eating any fruit. It is sitting always in a state of absolute bliss. And this bird corresponds to the 3/4 Tribad Udait Purushaka Utkarshena Vyavatishthade, that is Sayanacharya's commentary. So that's what actually Sayanacharya writes here also. Just read and I will explain. But it's very important to connect these two mantras of Asivamiya Suktam, which actually comes in the first mandala, 164th Suktam. It appears as mantra number 20. This is an important thing to remember. So remember, this is originally a Rigveda Samhita mantra, but it appears in Atharvaveda also, especially Atharvaveda Mundaka Upanishad. So Sayanacharya says, Atra laukika pakshidvaya drishtantena jivatma paramatmano stuyate. So these two birds, that is pakshidvaya, drishtanta means example, illustration of these two birds. The bird sitting above on the branch sits quiet. It is the transcendental Tripad Urdhayudai Purushaka. And the bird sitting below, it goes on eating, suffering and enjoying. It corresponds to Padaka. Padaka asya padosya vishwa bhutani. The entire created world, it represents the 1/4. So, Dva Suparna Supatanau Shobhanagamanau Sayuja Sakhaya Samana Yogu Samanakhyanu Samanam Vriksham Ekameva Vriksham Parishusajade Asayataka Tayohu Anyaka Swadu Pippalam Atti Madhuram Pakkum Phalam Bhakshayidi. This Sayanacharya says. So he is explaining what I said just now. The bird sitting on the branch below, it sometimes eats Madhuram Phalam, sweet fruit, but it is always expert sweet fruit. So it doesn't get sweet fruits all the time. Sometimes the fruits are sour, so it becomes unhappy. Like the predicament of human beings. We always seek happiness, so we become unhappy because it is not always possible to get happiness all the time. So, Anyaha anasnan abhichakasiti, aparaha abhipashyati. The other bird sitting on the branch above, it is Tribadaha, three quarters, the transcendental reality, the unchanging eternal reality is called Amrutam. It's called in the Prasukta, Amrutam means it is immortal. And if you realize your own identity with that Tribad, transcendental dimension, you also become immortal because that's your true nature. But you forget that and you behave like the bird sitting on the branch below. So, Anasnan Abhijaka, it doesn't eat any fruit. It just sits there witnessing, watching. So, it doesn't suffer because it is not seeking enjoyment all the time. So, you can see, if you go to Vedic literature, you can find absolutely fascinating and magnificent illustrations, great truths, not only great metaphysical truths, but also cosmology, the emergence and development, evolution, and the cosmogony. All these are explained in the powerful language of symbolism. So thank you. We can have interactions. You are most welcome. I hope there was a comment in one of the videos, maybe previous one. Somebody requested for an explanation of this 3/4 and 1/4. Tribad urdha uday purushaka padosi vishwa bhutani. That's a mantra which you can see that. Tribad means 3/4. Now, one may ask the question, how this came? Actually, 3/4 means 3/4. That's the meaning. Again, it is an attempt to explain the identity and oneness and unity of the macro and the micro. The micro dimension, the empirical dimension, and the macro, universal dimension are the same. That's the idea behind. So anyway, so now you are most welcome with questions. You can raise any question that you want. You are most welcome. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
David's hand is up, and David has the first question.
Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
My question was early in today's talk, you mentioned that the repetition of even just mere repetition of the mantras is beneficial. We hear this contradiction all the time, like in Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother, that sometimes they say, if you just repeat it like a parrot, you'll just squawk at the end of your life.
Yeah.
Other times we hear this repetition, even without feeling the depth of faith and meaning, can be helpful, as you mentioned early in the lecture. How would you understand this contradiction?
I should try to explain, Now, in mantra shastram, called the science of practicing repeating mantras, you find there are 4 levels of evolution of our identity with mantra. From the grossest to the lowest, from the lowest to the highest. At the preliminary level, you may recite a mantra loudly, we call Vaikari. That helps you because in 2 ways. Even without understanding anything, if you repeat a holy word or listen to something that's holy, it has its benefit. Because first of all, there's a vibration formed, which I don't know how to explain this in the language of modern science, but you certainly develop a sense of holiness in a place where you hear, where you associate with some holy, spiritually elevating sound mechanisms. You can feel that. You can see somebody shouting, some terrible sound coming, the siren. See, on the other hand, you listen to some music in any language we don't know, but you find the sound itself as a direct way of connecting with you. That's how music works. How many of us really understand the meaning of the different words used in music? But those who understand the meaning, for them it becomes a tool for meditation. For others, it becomes a great opportunity to still accumulate some spiritual energy by listening to. the lowest level, what is heard, what is pronounced loudly, called Vaikari. The higher level is Madhyama, where you don't hear very much, but you recite without making much noise. Then Pashyanti, there you recite it even without articulating. Para means you feel, you experience, you get this mystical experience of your identity with what the mantra actually signifies. There you are reciting the mantra, not like you did earlier, where you hear your own voice. When you loudly chant something, you hear yourself and others also hear. But here it is an inward experience. It goes beyond word. So this is an important thing to remember. So even Vaikari, listening to something, does have its benefit. No doubt about it. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, if we can understand the meaning, then it's easy for us to go deeper into that word simple, because it leads to contemplating on the meaning. Without understanding the meaning of what you are reading, what you are listening to, you cannot practice contemplation on it, mananam. So mantra is mantra because it helps you to practice mananam. And mananam is nothing but padartha mananam, means sravanartha, sudartha mananam. Sudartha means what you heard, and you meditate, you reflect, contemplate on the meaning of what you heard. That is called mananam. That is not possible unless you get the meaning. But remember, at the same time, even listening to or reading with all concentration and shraddha also helps you to connect with that. Another important thing I want to mention, a pure mind, a spiritually elevated person, even if he doesn't know the language and grammar, he will have an intuitive way of connecting the meaning of it. You know, he won't be able to teach the meaning to somebody. Then the mind has a dimension where it directly connects with the essence of the mantra. This is an important thing. One can easily listen to some hymns, some spiritual music, and still enjoy it, get the feeling of spiritual elevation we find, even without fully understanding meaning. That's the idea behind. Don't you agree, David?
Yes, thank you, Swami. That's a very nice explanation. So it's a gradation of the more one understands, the greater benefit one will get, but one will still get benefit just to hear it.
Yeah. The hearing itself has its benefit, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Swami.
Yeah, thank you.
Should we see Gopinath next?
Yeah. Namaste, Swami. My question is about the importance of Purusha Suktam. You find it is repeated and chanted in different occasions.
Yeah.
It's there every time Homa is performed, you hear it being chanted.
Yeah.
It's chanted as part of daily aradhanas.
Yeah.
It's Vaishnavites chanted whenever they perform the puja for the Saligrama. So
Yeah.
different sects, different groups, different events, but Purusha Suktam is constantly chanted at the beginning.
True.
What is the significance of Purusha Suktam, that this one particular Suktam has assumed so much importance for use in all these different occasions?
Yeah. You see, Purusha, the word Purusha itself, as I explained earlier, elaborately in the earlier sessions, means Purisheteti Purusha. I mean, we are invoking, we are connecting with the divine that is present within ourselves, which is residing within ourselves. That's a real meaning of the definition of Purusha, actually. So now, if a person can chant this, recite this, even, and I'm sorry to say that the majority of people recite this without understanding the meaning. So Purusha Suktam has got 4 important components. The beginning itself, the higher Advaita, Purusha evedam sarvam yatkin. Now you can find yad bhudam yatcha bhavyam, everything is Purusha, the one that belongs to the past, present and future and so on. And then you find this yajna, the whole creation is explained. And then you find, interestingly, the emergence of different types of human beings with different temperaments. The contemplative, the active, and of course those who are not so contemplative, those who are more or less involved in worldly activities, and also those who are not spiritually inclined. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya. So Brahmanosi Mukhama you can find. So that I don't go to later we'll discuss. And then you find, towards the end you find, it is meant for anusandhanam, contemplation, meditation. So in a way it combines all these different aspects. The highest metaphysics and philosophy, and also how that supreme truth, which is the subject of the highest philosophy and metaphysics, itself is involved in everything in this world, which is explained through this process of description of creation, yajna. And again the whole entire living beings, human beings emerged, human beings of different temperaments emerged from that Purusha. And finally you find, to the end you can find, that's a very famous mantra is there, that is, that comes, just a minute, that is very important for us to remember. It comes to the end, it is meant for anusandhanam, it is called, So for example, Vedahamedam Purusham Mahantam Adityavarnam Tamasap Parastat Tameva Viditva Adimurtimedi Na Anyapantha Vidyate Ayanaya. You see, look at this meaning. Okay, I am now realizing within my own being, my own heart, that's a self-effulgent divine Purusha, the divine reality, which removes all darkness of ignorance from my heart, which is self-effulgent. By realizing that, by getting the realization, I transcend death and I realize my own deathless dimension. So you can find it is called Uttaranarayana. That is the second Anuvaga you find in the Taittiriya version. Remember, this doesn't, of course, appear in this Rigveda. It is the Yajurvediya tradition. So you find, and there is no other way. So without realizing our own true identity with this self-effulgent supreme Purusha, supreme truth that is within, that is residing within myself. I mean, going beyond my body-mind complex, and by realizing, recognizing my identity with that Purusha, there is no other way. Na anyapantha vidyate ayanaya. I mean, for moksha, for spiritual enlightenment, there is no other way. So you can find all these are combined. That's why Purusha Sukta has become so prominent. Another very important reason that frequently that is referred to by many of the interpreters who came after Sayana, like for example Mahidhara, who came in the 16th century, is that it is found in all the 4 Vedas. It's one of those very few suktas which are found in all the 4 Vedas. Purusha Suktam in Rigveda is only just as only 16 mantras, but still those 16 mantras one way or other are found, at least most of them are found in other Vedas also. So it is so universal. It talks about the supreme spiritual realization of the truth within ourselves and everywhere. That's the idea behind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who is the question? I'm not able to see you in this new version of the iPad I'm using. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. The question was Sri C. Gopinath.
Oh, yeah, fine. Okay, thank you.
Maharaj, There's Mark has his hand up, but there's a question on YouTube that I think you might be able to answer rather quickly.
Yeah.
So I'll take that first.
Yeah, please.
It reads, if 1/4 Brahman became this change in creation, doesn't it make Brahman as a whole changing too?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, it is Vedic symbolism and Vedic poetry. You don't find this kind of analysis or description in the Upanishads, which are much more straightforward. But Rigveda mantras are all full of illustrations, imageries, and metaphors. So, the same reality, this empirical world, if you look at the empirical world beyond the nama and rupa, beyond the name and form, the same empirical world is nothing but Brahman. So, if you, the essence of it behind this changing phenomena is the same. It is non-different from the tripath, the 3/4. So, it is a Vedic symbolism used in this particular Purusha Suktam. That's all.
Follow up, Brahman / Purusha. So the questioner is trying to trying to clarify the question.
So, what is, excuse me, can you repeat that once more? Now your picture is clear. Before that, this system did not show you clearly. Please, can you repeat once more what you said just now?
So originally the question's written, if 1/4 Brahman became this change in creation, doesn't it make Brahman as a whole changing too? And the follow-up is Brahman /
okay.
Purusha.
Actually, this empirical world is still 1/4 of the reality. So again, the 3/4, 1/4, that is a symbolism used it's a poetical device used in this particular suktam. This is an important. See, if you ask the question, why should two birds, why are they, if they are the same, why should one eat and why should keep quiet? If you ask the question really, again it's a symbolism. See, that's why I can explain this in the light of that bird imagery. See, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakhaya, they are friends, they have the same color, the same feathers, everything the same. Samanam Vriksham Parishusajade, and they are sitting on the same tree, of course in 2 different branches. But Ayor Anyapipalam Swadati, of which one it goes on eating sweet fruits, and then Abhishakasiti. Anasnan Anyo Abhichakasiti. The other bird is Anasnan, it doesn't eat anything. So, actually, the predicament of the ordinary human beings who go through, because they don't realize their true identity with the other birds sitting above, and of course in the other commentaries, it goes like slowly starts moving upward, and when it reaches the top branch, it realizes its similarity, its identity with the other bird. Like that, when you are part of this padaka, padosya vishwabhutani, when you realize that you are part of this empirical changing universe, this relative universe, but when you realize this is just 1/4 and the transcendent dimension is 3/4, but they all but one same reality. When you realize this, then you transcend this dividing line. Before that, we experience the dividing line. We hear that Brahman is the same, but then we are living in this world. We are part of this world. How can you believe that this world is mithya? It is different from Brahman. It is unreal. How can you say that? But when we actually recognize the fact of its relativity, that it's changing all the time, it is non-eternal, then we slowly start contemplation, meditation, study, like the. And then we realize this quarter is not different from the 3 quarters. The bird sitting below is quarter, pada is not different from the 3 quarters, the 3 paths. That's right. This is a poetical device used in different suktas. So you have to remember poetry. So there are certain poetical forms which may give the feeling that it is easy, you can sing, you can enjoy. But the greater poetry, when you read it, it catches you and it endures you. Think of it, that's a real poetry. So this is an interesting example of supreme poetical flights of the Vedic sages. Okay, thank you.
Oh yes, thank you, Maharaj, and thank you to the questioner on YouTube. And now Mark has a question.
Oh, see, Gopinath. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Mr. Gopinath. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening, Swamiji.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, please.
Okay. We've been talking about Brahman, and I come across in my short study of the Yagna the term Brahmanas. Could you explain what the Brahmanas are?
Yeah, I will say. Okay. Brahmanosi mukhamasid bahu rajanyakradha uru vaishega padbhyam shutra. We will discuss that later. So Brahmana, in the original sense, Brahmajnanaditi Brahmana. So Brahmana is defined as a person who realizes the unity and oneness of, the spiritual unity and oneness of existence. That everything is Brahman in this world. A person, an individual, anyone for that matter, who experiences, not just believes in, but experiences this unique ideal of spiritual unity of the whole existence. Such a person is Brahmana. That's the idea behind. In Shankaracharya's commentary in the Gita, you find that this is explained in terms of Sattva-guna, Rajo-guna, Tamo-guna, and different proportions. If a person is of a contemplative nature and he's more of a meditative nature, he can be called Brahmana because you're more Sattva-guna. So Sattva-guna Prathana, that is Chadurvarnim Maya System Guna Karma Vibhagasaka Tasya Kartaram Abhimam Vidya Kartaram. You find in the Gita definition, a person who goes Sattva-guna is Brahmana. That's the idea. Sattva-guna Prathana. Rajoguna, I mean active, but the predominant feature is Sattva-guna. That is the thing. So that's what Shankaracharya says. Yeah. Of course, remember, please one more I shall add. Of course, these definitions, these ideas later on changed in course of time, in course of history. Frequently you find when a great ideal is practiced in society, it can become something else. It can become a hereditary privilege system. That happened, I often tell, if you look at the history of Bolshevik Revolution 1917, and if you read about the history of Soviet Union 1960s, 50s, 60s and 70s, there were special supermarkets, schools and colleges exclusively meant for the Presidium members, where the normal common people cannot go. I am talking about the Soviet Union in the 60s and 50s. But so it was meant to establish an egalitarian, absolutely democratic society as far as they understood in whatever way they understood in 1970. But later it completely lost its character, its true nature. So the same thing happened in India. What was essentially meant a kind of division of labor system, a division of temperament, human characteristics, later became a privilege system based on birth, and that frequently happens, and actually that's a subject that we need not bother too much about on this platform, because it can lead to a lot of controversial arguments. Okay, thank you. It's a sociological question, not a philosophical question, which we are concerned with right now. Okay, thank you.
Swamiji,
Yeah,
the term that I was referring to was Brahmanas.
yeah, yeah.
Is that something different? Brahmanas?
Okay, because Brahmana is the word. Yeah. In the Purusha Suktam you find Brahmanosya Mukhamasit. So those who are of a contemplative nature, they originated, they were born of the face of the cosmic person. So so again, this is symbolism. If you can think of the supreme spiritual reality as a human personality, physical personality, then those who are of a contemplative nature correspond to the face, or those who came from the face, they emerged from the face of the cosmic person. So that is symbolism. Remember, it's a poetical device used by the Vedic poets. You can find many examples throughout, you find, in the entire Rigvedic literature. It's a huge work. As I mentioned, more than 10,000 verses. So it's a wonderful poetry. It's a wonderful poetical, magnificent poetry. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Maharaj, I have a question. I'll yield it. There's a question on the Zoom chat.
Yeah.
From Lakshmi. Swamiji, which is the text you mentioned during the lecture which has the powerful symbols?
A text that I referred to at the beginning.
Yeah, perhaps it's the book that you held up as you were referring to the text.
Maybe you are referring to my reference to Sayanacharya's commentary.
Probably.
I listened. I just referred to some of the statements from the great Vedic commentators, the outline, who gave an outline of the principles of interpretation of the Vedic mantras. That's what I said. Of course, there were many.
I'm not sure if the question refers to an English translation or whether it refers to a Sanskrit text that you are referring to.
I think perhaps you are mentioning, I mentioned at the very beginning, the first attempt to explain Vedic mantras, historically speaking, goes back to perhaps 9th or 8th century BC. It's called Nikhantu, Veda Nikhantu. And there was a commentary, another book based on the Veda Nikhantu, it's called Niruktam. That goes back to maybe 6th or 9th, around 8th century BC, Yaska's Niruktam. And the first attempt to explain and interpret the Vedic Samhita in the light of ritualistic practice was done by Skanda Swami in I think 630 was the time when he was born, 7th century AD. Then Bhattabhaskara came, who wrote on Yajurveda, and others, Mahidhara, of course, in I think 16th century, Sayana in the 13th, 14th century, and so on. So the point is, I may have mentioned to some authors, but I am now not referring to Sayana alone, because Sayanacharya's commentary is not very comprehensive. So I was referring to the commentaries. My description is based on my study, my acquaintance with the works of authors like Sayana, Mangalacharya, Nimbarka, and Mahidhara. So one of them, Nimbarkacharya, is a great prominent Vedantin of the Vaishnava Bhakti tradition, different from Shankaracharya's Advaita, but he was a great devotee. So they have commented upon, written commentaries on Purusha Suktam, because it is recited in many of the pujas, in many of the rituals, especially in temples where some aspects of Vishnu, Krishna, is worshipped, is more important. So that's why it is called Puranarayana, Uttaranarayana. The later part is called second Anuvaga. He has got a different name. So that's what we already discussed earlier. That's why it is so auspicious. I give the example of listening to, even reciting some holy mantras like this. One can feel for yourself if you just listen to these mantras. Maybe there may be different examples of recitation in the YouTube and internet. You may not understand the meaning fully, but still if you listen to it, you can see our mind is transported to a higher level. How does it happen? Very difficult to explain. That is true also of great devotional poets who had some spiritual experience. Their words can move you. You may not know the language or the meaning of it. Great poetry and also great music can directly connect itself with you. So otherwise it's not really a great poem. Great poem. If you need to know everything, the word meaning of every word that a poet has used to understand it, that poetical work is not worth reading. Poetical work, it has a dimension where it connects with everyone. That's how a great poet is born. That's great poetry is written. Okay, thank you.
Maharaj, is there time for Kuma's question?
Yeah,
Kuma,
I think we can conclude now. We can continue.
Would you like to ask it? Sorry, Maharaj.
Please help me go ahead and ask the question, Bobby, for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maharaj, do you have time?
So we can conclude now. I think it's 7:35, 7:36. So we'll conclude now. So thank you very much. We'll continue our discussion next week. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.